The presenting sponsor of Public Power Underground is PlugPass. PlugPass is not pioneering or innovative in any way. PlugPass is a simple, low-cost way to use existing infrastructure to get electricity to where people can charge their car. Electric vehicle public charging is really that simple. And yet, some companies are trying to make electric vehicle charging way more complicated than it needs to be, so that they can charge more for fancy extension cords. Not PlugPass, we just install an outlet at a parking space, because that's all most people need. PlugPass, it's open source. PlugPass, it's just an outlet. Welcome to Public Power Underground, Northwest Public Power infotainment that began as awkward forced fun for the Power Department 39 weeks ago, when we altered our work arrangement at the start of an ongoing pandemic. I assure my team every week it's work to watch. On today's show, we'll get an update on Northwest power markets on Arin's Report, check out the news on Public Power Desktop, have a scintillating discussion about post-2028 power supply, and subject our guests to very personal questions with a segment we call Slummin with the Underground. I'm Paul Dockery, and today we're joined by a special guest star, the Director of Transmission and Markets for PNGC, Alex Swerzbin. Welcome to Public Power Underground, Alex.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
And you've been at PNGC for before the pandemic, or did you start during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I am the new one at PNGC, and I actually did the interview and started in the middle of the pandemic. So I was at Avangrid Renewables, and the CEO at PNGC, his name is Roger Gray, and I had worked for him before I went to Avangrid at EWEB, Eugene Water and Electric Board. So I knew him and have stayed in touch. So that made it a little easier. And he had a position that opened up, and I took it. And so yeah, I've been there since June. So, I'm still pretty young. There's a lot of people there that have been there, 10 plus or minus years.
Still really difficult to participate in interviews, I would assume, during a pandemic. Were they all Zooms?
They were all Zooms. Yeah, it was kind of funny because it was my first position. I've been in energy now for, I think since 2007, 2010 off and on. And I've always been on more, operations side on trading floors and stuff. So I've always been on open floor concepts. This was my first time having an actual office, and I've been there an entirety of twice for maybe 35 minutes.
That's amazing. And we definitely don't need
career milestone just gone bye-bye.
Yeah, we definitely don't need to go back and track how many years we've been doing this. I did it the other day for a not interesting reason, and it definitely made me realize why I have gray in my beard.
That's why I just keep my beard away so you don't see all the gray.
That's smart. I should probably shave. We're also joined by the star of Arin Reports, co-star of Public Power Underground, financial analyst Arin Guillory. Good afternoon, Arin.
Afternoon, Paul. Happy to be on the pod.
It's great to have you. We're going to start this week checking on power market indicators in the Northwest with our first segment, Arin Reports.
Great. Let's get into it. All right, this is Arin Reports, built to take a few minutes to cover Northwest market indicators for December 17th, 2020. I'm Arin Guillory, and I've got your market update for the week. April-September flows, the Dows are expected to be 89,068, a 1988 climb from last week compared to a 92,704 30-year average, putting the anomaly at 96. Midday outflows of the Dows were 148.1, up from 104.3 a week prior, a 43.8 step up. On the cattle complex, the latest choice cutout value is 207.22, up 160 compared to 206.82 at noon. Nebraska traded over 10,000 head yesterday, around 105 in the beef. Taking 84 east, scaling north to Grand Coulee Dam, midday elevation was 1280.7, and 8 rise for midday last Thursday at 1279.9. Outflow hit 76.7 last week midday, and we saw an increase this week to 78.5, up 1 and 8. From week prior. On the pork complex, the latest lean hog index posted on the boards at 65.80, down 17, and the pork cutout value is posted up 72 at 74.86. Mid-C power at night settled around 24.84. Daylight brought 29.53, high 34.50, low 19.75. August power at mid-C went up to 66.30 today, compared to 63.55 the last time reported on Public Power Underground. In the bond markets, one Washington Water District very recently issued about 40,595 million. That's 40,595,000 with 5% interest rates and yields averaging 87 bips. The CPC maintained the ONI of negative 1.2 for September, October, November, with most recent SST departures at negative 1.2 for Nino, 3.4 index, and currently predicts a 95% chance. Again, La Nina will continue through winter 2021. Other sources reported maintained negative 1.06 current index. Spending a beat at Bonneville's Balance Authority. Midday load hit 7 grand, a 300 rise from 6,700 last week. Midday hydrogen in the area zoomed to 7,400, a 600 rise from a week ago. While midday wind gen, tired of carrying the team, dropped down to 57 from 2,500 last week midday. Sunday, 18 steelhead passed through the lower Granite Dam, fairly similar to last week at 14. Henry Hub January futures opened at 2,682 on Tuesday, and August opened at 2,802. Sumas gas in August closed at a 24-cent discount to Henry Hub. Translation, Mid-Sea August power is priced at a 25,000 heat rate. That's quite hot. Temp in the region has a 40 to 50% chance of being above normal, with recent regional temperatures still largely in the 40s. Precipitation in the region has a 40 to 50% chance of being above average in the 6 to 10 day outlook, anticipated to be maintained in a 40 to 60% chance of being above average in the most recent 1 month outlook for NOAA. Prices are settling high in the grain contracts as the inflationary dollar returns. Bid-ask Feb hogs are 65.80 on the boards, down 17 with light volume and a firmer opening. And that's all we've got for our update this week. Back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Aaron. Two things. One, I'm pretty sure the Washington was not a water district. That was a hangover from last week. The bonds were issued by, I don't believe it was a water district.
Oh, Clark County PUD.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep.
Is that easily edited out, or do you need me to say that?
We're gonna leave this in. I think this is a good segment to add on an actual discussion of what's going on.
Why? Paul likes to leave in my errors.
Sometimes it's good content. The
I
other
think
one
that was just amazing. I mean, getting through that so fast. You might have a second career as an auctioneer. That was impressive.
Thank you all.
Arin Reports is my favorite segment. It's and I do it as a standalone because I think it's good content.
Thank you.
I feel like that was the first 2 hours of my day on a trading floor, just knocked out in 2 minutes.
Yeah. What's going on, man? August, the heat rate 25,000. Are you serious, Alex?
That is pretty high. That is moving. I mean, that's expecting to get a lot of heat and getting some gas moving there.
Okay, and now our weekly walkthrough of Northwest Public Power and Public Power adjacent news in a segment we like to call Public Power Desktop. Aaron, are you ready to kick things off for us?
Absolutely, you got it. Solar Plus facilities are the rage in the region, with TerraGen announcing an agreement with Mortensen as its EPC contractor for an 1,118 megawatt solar plus 2,165 megawatt hours of energy storage facility. And PGE announcing that it has commenced commercial operation on the 300 megawatt wind portion of a solar plus wind plus storage facility in Morrow County, Oregon. Co-locating technologies helps optimize interconnection facilities and possibly DC inverters while increasing a project's contribution to peak needs. Note, for more stories like these, make sure you're subscribed to the Energy News Digest, sponsored by the Northwest Public Power Association.
Hey, I got a quick comment. I think what's really cool when you see this, and I think it kind of goes into future power supply, which we'll talk about later, is when you see solar and battery and wind kind of put in similar areas, really taking advantage of each resource type and the shape and when they're producing, and then bringing in batteries on a larger scale, is a good indicator of the renewable penetration and, I think what the mix will be. But, I think that really helps a lot.
You kind of are able to optimize the different resource types and make them apply more towards your load shape, right?
Mm-hmm. And just to see that the one down south, to have that size of a solar with batteries, it's impressive. The industry just keeps pushing on, bigger projects and the inclusion of batteries, which is huge. I mean, the more batteries you can get, the more economical we can get large scale batteries. I think the better for everybody. These are good articles.
Yeah, one of the things I have learned and find fascinating is the concept of putting the battery behind the inverter on the solar panel and using the same inverter for both the solar panel and the battery. So you save some cost. And then you're also able to oversize your panels and then store the energy and use the energy and the inverter capacity later in the day. I think that's a really smart application. I think
I agree, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't remember all the details, but I think that also helps with the tax credits applicable, is where you
That's
put, so it's actually flowing into those batteries, and it helps get more of, I think, the ITCs or maximize those, which, is a good thing to get these renewables and continue to get them on the grid.
Yep, exactly. I believe that is one of the big motivators for doing it that way, is because you get the ITC. Out with the old, in with the new. A path forward with a regionally coordinated transmission organization that isn't tied to deregulation is presented in a recent op-ed by Colorado State Senator Chris Hansen and the director at Western Grid Group, Doug Howe. It is in response to a prior opinion piece which warned of erosion of control, of local control. It's really hard to click on these things while I'm also reading. It is in response to a prior opinion piece which warned of the erosion of control by state energy policies in an RTO. The authors assert that coordinated grid and regional power markets are inevitable because they help resolve rifts between regulators and the regulated, and argue that the Western energy imbalance market is an example of a market that successfully operates in a footprint with diverse state energy policies. For more, check out Utility Dive, an online publication covering topics such as smart grid, regulation, policy, demand response, generation, and more. In with the new, Alex? Are we in with the new?
We are getting in with the new. I mean, times are changing, so you got to keep up. And I just think this article does a really good job of pointing out that these more organized market structures, like an RTO or an ISO, actually can go hand in hand with helping diversification of new resource types and, including more renewables. The big issue is they're kind of intermittent in nature. And so you really need a resilient, reliable grid. And if you have that, and transmission access, which is extremely important for these new resources, if you have that, it really helps in getting, the most efficient resources put online, getting more resources put online, and I think giving people choice.
So I was inclined to really like this piece because you sent it, but I was a little skeptical. The evidence they try to point to around like regional RTOs working with diverse energy policies is of course the EIM, and the EIM isn't an RTO. And actually, I think there's probably some friction even in the EIM of trying to implement unique policy choices in the dispatch. But what they did well, and I really do like, is kind of bifurcating the concept of the RTO from deregulation.
When I actually do share your skepticism, and I kind of use RTO and ISO interchangeably, even though there can be slight differences there. But and they use California because it's kind of the one that's existing, and I think that is good as a comparison because it shows these market structures do a lot of the things they talk about. But I think what's important to learn from that, especially what you see in California, is you still have governance issues and you still have to deal with that. And that can cause issues, and that can, be something that you need to deal with and you need to manage. And so, maybe looking at existing and, building better policies or better structures off of that, is kind of the learning step from something like this. But I just like it how it really, I think, affects transmission, and transmission is essential to keep changing the portfolio mix of new resources. As thermals come offline, you need to have areas where, renewables, they're not always in these load serving areas, where the space is, and you got to be able to transport that to areas of high load. And I think that, that is something we're going to need to reconsider in the Northwest, is looking at RTOs and ISOs, and whether that's combining with existing or, bringing back that old conversation of, maybe a regionalized one.
We're revisiting BPA's initial proposal to focus on the increasing composite cost rate. The headline out of the initial proposal is that power rates are held flat, but we're seeing an increasing rate component. To help us understand, we're joined by special guest correspondent Mike Deen, PPC's policy director.
Hi, Mike. Welcome to Public Power Underground. Thanks for agreeing to drop in.
I really appreciate you having me, Paul, and I'm always excited when someone wants to chat a little BPA rates.
Yeah, we love it. I find it fascinating. I'm trying to narrow in on what to call these drop-ins, and I'm kind of solidifying around calling you a special guest correspondent. What do you think of being a special guest correspondent? You like that?
I would. It would be my honor. to add that to the CV.
That's exactly right. This should be on your CV. This is that important. So I wanted to talk about the BPA initial proposal and specifically around the composite cost rates. As I went into the initial proposal, you can see that the composite cost rate goes up from BP20. But the headline is these are flat power rates. And I was hoping just to get your clarification of how Bonneville thinks about power rates overall for its customers and how an increased composite cost rate could tie to overall no cost or no increase.
Yeah, so it's a great question, Paul, and it's a topic I have a little bit of sympathy, honestly, for BPA on. We have this tiered rates methodology that has a lot of complexity designed around, achieving certain goals in terms of equity and in terms of sort of cost signals to give people incentives for managing their loads and what kind of resources they develop. But it does result in kind of a lot of different impacts to different customers, between the different product types, slice, non-slice, load following, block, whether you might be impacted depending on your product by, these load shaping charges or demand charges. So all these things come together to create a really wide variety of impacts from any BPA rate proposal on an individual utility. But, you also need to have some kind of metric to look at the overall picture.
Right.
And so what BPA uses for that is something they call this tier 1 average net cost. And that's the metric that they've come up with to just measure what is the overall cost of power for tier 1 for all customers.
Okay.
So that's the metric that they're referring to when they talk about it being a zero increase. And what that essentially is just takes all of the net cost for tier 1 power and divides it by all of the total tier 1 load to come up with a dollars per megawatt hour number. And there's some adjustments also that have to happen because a huge part of the rate for non-slice is the credit that BPA applies for its sales of secondary energy.
Right. And we saw
slice customers. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And one of the things I noticed is that non-slice credit goes up quite a bit in this rate proposal.
Exactly. So in this case, a BPA is projecting a significantly higher value of those secondary sales for this upcoming rate period than they were in the last rate period. And for the load following customers or for the non-slice products, those get embedded as a credit into the rates. But for the slice product, you obviously have those customers marketing that energy themselves,
right?
And realizing the revenue sort of off the books from a BPA perspective. So what they do for this metric, for the tier 1 average net cost, is they basically assume or pretend that everyone is a load following customer. And they have an implicit value of that non-slice secondary.
So it's a way for them to acknowledge the remarketing slice customers do.
Exactly, to put everyone on the same playing field for this overall metric, so you can compare across rate periods more easily. You can compare if for example, large customer Seattle City Light changed from being a slice customer to a block only customer a few rate periods ago. So that changed the overall slice percentage. So this metric is not perfect, doesn't capture all the individual variation, but it gives you a high level way to compare kind of across rate periods, even if products change, if other things change, gives kind of a baseline.
So is it fair to interpret then that with the composite cost rate increasing, that kind of reflects the embedded cost of the system going up a little bit? I think the way I calculated it was about a 4% increase from BP20 to BP22 on that composite cost rate. But what they're saying is the secondary value has increased around 4%, so that offsets that increase in the embedded cost of the system. Is that a fair way of thinking about it?
Yep, that's exactly the right way to think about it. And there's, that's exactly right. So there's a couple components of that cost increase. There are BPA's program costs, which they've kept flat pretty much.
Okay.
What they do in the integrated program review for their budgets. Then you have, different settlements that have some change in costs. But the biggest piece that's the increase that I think you've talked about and a lot of people are focusing on right now is this proposal to add about $95 million per year of additional debt repayment, or revenue financing, sort of same effect. And so that's the biggest driver of that cost increase in the composite cost pool.
So that 4% increase that the composite cost pool is going up is driven by, it was $95 million of revenue financing, I'll call it, per year or per rate period?
Per year. And there's a lot of, nuances and caveats around that they give themselves some flexibility to do a little bit more in one year and a little bit less in the other year of the rate period. But the target is 95 million per year and capped at the total amount for the rate period of 190 million.
Okay. That's the kind of insights I was hoping to get out today. I do have additional questions when it comes to, that workshop we had in September where they talked about the need to revenue finance and how the modeling screwed up, or for lack of a better word. I'd like to have you back to talk about that because I think it is maybe more than just a drop in. Maybe we can actually do a longer conversation about that modeling, if you're up for it.
Yeah, I'd love to. And, we're in the middle as PBC, we're in the middle of analyzing the BPA rate proposal right now, getting really into depth, getting our discovery requests in for some additional information. We're going to be in a great position to do a deep dive here at some point in the coming weeks. Which
just honestly really appreciate what PPC does for all of us smaller utilities to try to better understand Bonneville rates, because we don't have that expertise, at Clatskanie, and I think a lot of other small utilities rely on you all. Do a great job and really appreciate you. And so thanks a lot for coming on, and thanks for all the work you do, Mike. Well, appreciate that, Paul, and we're here for you, and we couldn't do it without you guys. So that's, like I said, that's why we're here, and we're happy to do it. Okay, talk again soon. All right, thanks a lot, Paul. Found in Clearing Up's news roundup is the heartwarming nugget that the city of Boise updated its building code standards to require at least one 240-volt circuit to be installed in garages for newly constructed single-family homes and townhouses. This is a good time to remind everyone that a level 2 charger is nothing but a 240-volt circuit with an extension cord hardwired. A lot of electric vehicles come with the extension cord, so just use the outlet. My internet is this terrible if you're wondering why it's taking so long for this to load.
After proposing an 11.6% increase in transmission rates and the start of revenue financing in the Transmission Capital Program, BPA determined to apply the entire $79.7 million fiscal year 2020 transmission RDC toward debt reduction following the November 2019 QBR and subsequent customer commentary. BPA reviewed the comments, which proved variable, with some customers supporting application of the RDC toward debt reduction and others suggesting use of the excess reserves in different rate relief strategies. Bonneville maintained that application of the fiscal year 2020 transmission RDC towards debt reduction will help mitigate upward rate pressure going forward and assist with both bolstering and preserving available borrowing authority.
News broke earlier this week that hackers have hijacked software updates released by IT company SolarWinds for Orion products, injecting them with malware dubbed Sunburst. The hacked updates become a Trojan horse for the hackers to breach the networks of Orion's clients when a victim downloads a seemingly trustworthy Orion patch, much like updating apps on your phone. The hackers got a backdoor into the target computer system. The Russia-backed hacking group, nicknamed Cozy Bear, is believed to be responsible for the attack, which may have potentially breached U.S. federal agencies, electric power utilities, at least 2 Energy Department national labs, and thousands of other organizations. Holy cow!
Boom!
Big news with a utility edge. First
it
reported in Reuters.
I mean, I think I saw some that it's one of the biggest or the biggest hack in U.S. history on like U.S. assets and things, or maybe towards the U.S. government, which, it's really big. And I hope it becomes a positive. I think they talked a little bit about that in the article because, you've heard it for a while now being in the electric industry that one of the big vulnerabilities, of the United States is in the whole is our electric grids.
Yeah.
And, if you could destabilize those, you could potentially cause some real problems. So hopefully this is something that ends up being minor in its effect negatively towards us, but then pushes us to get more security and to be better protective of our grids across the country, because that could be a huge vulnerability.
Absolutely. I do think we should at least acknowledge that they called the malware Sunburst on the company of Solar Winds. I think, that's, I mean, I don't know who named it, but that's pretty witty. We got to at least acknowledge the wit, right?
Moody's expects a stable public power sector, citing the industry's generally strong liquidity and ability to self-regulate rate setting to implement reasonable rate strategies for cost recovery in poor economic conditions. Fitch's outlook notes additionally that lower expenses in pandemic times have helped preserve margins and liquidity to further ease upward pressure on rates. Both acknowledge concerns in the outlook, both COVID and non-COVID related, including disproportionate impacts on service territories devoid of industrial and commercial customers in essential industries such as food, hygiene, and medical supplies, as well as forecast increases in operational costs in response to an increased focus on climate issues under a Biden administration.
Yeah, for more Public Power Daily, really good newsletter that the APPA puts out.
It makes me think of just kind of being grateful to be in this industry, that, is kind of seen as an essential business, and, actually probably will rebound stronger after this pandemic. You just see so much hardship, so many industries and so many people facing that through the pandemic. And I just feel blessed, to be a part of an industry that can withstand it like ours,
Absolutely.
Jobs and keep living.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, I saw a lot in these articles of also having the opportunity to leverage our stable position just to pass on that blessing to our customers through those cost recovery rate strategies, and to be able to rely on our liquidity and all the money we're saving with capital projects that have been halted to gracefully move forward without overstraining people who have been, very disproportionately impacted by COVID. Yeah, I could not agree more.
That's one of my favorite things about kind of public power and co-ops and, kind of energy world is we really get to directly benefit and help and work with our customers. I mean, there is flexibility to help them in times of need, like you were just saying, Aaron. And again, I just think it's a great industry for that. You really get fulfillment in multiple ways.
That's right. And that's the news for the week. If you have news you want us to cover on Public Power Desktop, let us know. Up next is a post-2028 power supply discussion with Alex. I think we're going to get a pitch. I invited Alex on because he's a peer in the industry and a perspective that I was eager to hear about his thoughts about post-2028 after our Bonneville contracts expire. And now I will caveat that I expect this to be your opinion, not necessarily PNGC's. So you get to be a little bit freer, and maybe that'll give you a liability waiver.
That is perfect. I will keep it to kind of my opinions. And yeah, again, I appreciate being asked to come on. And I think this is a really, important topic. So I'll kind of get into a little bit and then look forward to the back and forth. But so just, initially is, I kind of look at the picture of post-28 power supply. I just think right now is really an exciting time. I mean, when you think about all the things kind of going on the market, one kind of what creates this post-28 timeframe is the Bonneville contracts up. That is not something that happens very often. So it really opens up the world of decisions on how you want to construct your portfolio. And I think those are, exciting things. And then, you see some of the other things that I think really play into getting to kind of constructing that resource portfolio and deciding, different resources are other huge kind of market structure and kind of swings, in the environment and in the region, things like the push for, reliability. That is a huge thing that's coming back up as you see thermals coming offline and being replaced by a diverse set of renewables and other resources. And you see that coming out as well through, RA and capacity talks and more formalized markets there. And so I think it's just really important to consider those. And then, as we discussed a little bit earlier, but I think it really gets into an exciting time where the region can really start to analyze again, which isn't a new topic, but, maybe fresh set of data inputs around RTOs or ISOs. You see sort of expansion through EIM and talks with CAISO on EDAM and, things of that nature. And you start to see a little competition through, RA as SPPs kind of coming in, and people are again starting to discuss the benefits of RTOs and ISOs. And I think that is, really important. And those all play into future resource decisions. So, that coupled with the regulations and, the consistent push of, zero carbon or, low carbon resources, capacity for reliability, the continuance of, RPS standards and the push for further renewables, it just opens up to a very exciting time and a lot of decisions, in a legacy industry that are now fresh and new, which I think is, kind of really cool. And so I think my first pitch is when I'm looking at post 28 and the best resource type, RTOs, ISOs, it's not new school. You got to kind of go back to the old school favorite. And it just seems like coal's going to make a reemergence, It's the reliability, it's the cost efficiency. It's just, it might come back full swing.
You heard it here first, folks. PNGC is going coal in 2028. Fully subscribe. Coal is the only resource you need.
Coal is the way to go. We're all in on carbon capture. That's it. That's the only bullet in the quiver. No, or arrow in the quiver.
Shove it back underground, or just shove it in the plastic bottles and put the caps back on it, and it's done.
It's done. It's there. No, that was kind of my fun joking pitch. As you see it, power supply, coal, thermals. I mean, it's been amazing to me to see the speed in which we moved from getting rid of coal to now the same mindsets and behaviors towards natural gas, and just really getting thermals off the grid, which I don't push against. But again, I keep going back to, in your future power supply, you really got to consider reliability and transmission access and those market structures that affect that. And that is going to be extremely important as you get into looking at how you construct portfolios and what options you have for post power supply, which we can get into in a second. Looks like you wanted to ask a question, so I'll pause for a minute.
Yeah, I just you have this perspective around transmission that I think I don't generally have, but is critical, right? The transmission is going to be so hard to build transmission like ever again. And it's so important to optimize the utilization of the transmission that we have, which is one of the things that organized markets do well. That's why I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, that's really what like an RTO and ISO is for, is really on the transmission side, to provide fair open access, to provide reliability, to ensure that there's a mechanism to incent investments. Like you were saying, it is really hard to get new transmission built. So you got to find a way where people can develop those economically and then get a return. And through an organized market like an ISO and RTO, that function is provided. It's not someone having to take that on themselves through debt or, like a revenue finance or some model and basically pass that on ultimately to customers. I mean, I know it does get passed on to customers, but it's more socialized through an RTO and an ISO, and it can be. Absolutely. And I think that is, extremely important. You look at kind of vulnerable. I mean, I think they are preparing. You see the things they're doing with revenue financing and trying to build their reserves and trying to better manage their debt and, have lower the debt so they have more open credit and things of that nature. I think that is in preparation for potential transmission investments, whether that's new upgrades, whether that's investments, in maintenance on existing. It's extremely important. And you can see them positioning themselves for that. And so what's the best way for the region to have security in that transmission that then can get us to what we're going to talk about more so is what different power supply options, how can we create, more reliable, more carbon-free, more renewable energies on the grid and get it to load serving centers.
Absolutely. So we got our first pitch, which is 100% coal, which I think is what you said PNGC is going to do. What's the second pitch?
You put that one down. I may have to get a coal tattoo on my neck or something, just to make sure that everybody knows. But so, and the next one, it's kind of a mix, but I think, initially one of the things that's really important is hydro, to preserve the existing hydro system. And, if there's any way where you can kind of increase hydro, it is really important. I mean, storage for hydro is proven, it's shapeable, it's clean, there's no carbon to it. And that is important as you get thermals off the system. There has to be something that replaces them, in terms of base load, in terms of, being able to adjust to intermittent renewables. And so, hydro is always going to be huge. Hydro is big in the Northwest. And so, I think that gets into the question. You're seeing some projects pop up now that, for a little bit didn't seem as economic without that kind of reliability concern. But pump storage, you're seeing kind of an emergence, and you've heard of some projects that are coming out there, and so I think that'll continue to be looked at for post power supply, and so part of that pitch is hydro is a good staple and has to be a part of the portfolio moving forward, and it helps then to integrate these other renewables, and so I think pushing and on wind and solar is important. I mean, not only are they clean, they're carbon free. They also are pretty economic. I mean, you've seen the price of those projects dropping now for a little bit. And so when you look at utilities, locking in some of those cheaper renewables meets a lot of targets, including providing good economic value to your customers or your member customers. And so, I think continuing that push, I think regulation on carbon is probably a good thing, as long as it's not just adding cost, but incentivizing new resources, having ultimately the market structures to provide for that. And then, you get into batteries and things of that nature, where I think that's really, really important, because battery technology, as we invest in it and it gets better, the costs will come down, which is needed. So you can have, larger scale batteries to pair with these renewables. I think part of the push, we need to maintain a lot of the, I guess, subsidies, for lack of a better word, ITCs, potential production tax credits, to keep these renewables being economic and getting developed. Because I think that's a big push as well. And this is more of a personal feel. I actually, and I don't know how well maybe this is agreed on, or if other people, kind of keep this push, but I actually see biomass as an important generation type, because it's really thermal, but for the most part, it's renewable fuel source. And so, it kind of comes out and produces a renewable. There's really low emissions out of those projects for the most part. And they can operate like a baseload thermal. I mean, they can kind of be turned on and off to some degree, akin to like what coal is, maybe not quite as quick as natural gas, but, like a coal plant. And you see a lot of those projects, in the Northwest and, kind of up and down the West. I don't want people to forget about biomass and investing in that and continuing to grow that. It also helps support local industries. I mean, Oregon and Washington, for instance, timber has been a big industry, and there's been a lot of job loss and things from the timber industry kind of shrinking and different regulations applied to it. But if you add another, area of revenue, that's smart stewardship of these timberlands that provides, clean energy, it can keep that process going. It keeps jobs going. And, I think that's just a positive step. I like business increase to help steward of our environment be hand in hand, if that kind of makes sense. I kind of jumbled that in there together, but
yeah,
that's
does.
kind of my second pitch. I'll pause for a minute just in case there's, questions and thoughts. But
Yeah, and one of the components, and your second pitch kind of highlighted this for me, is the thinking about diversification of resources mix, not only in terms of like we used to think of diversifying your resource mix in order to diversify your fuel risk because of natural gas and coal and oils, and diversifying to wind and solar gave you a diversity of costs from your fuel supply. One of the things I think about in the post 2028 discussion is what happens and what are the generator attributes and the generator components that each resource brings, because as you diversify out of kind of the conventional spinning mass rotor of a synchronous generator, we talked about this a little bit last week, there are components of those generator types, there are attributes of that generation you don't get out of like a solar or a wind, because of the difference in like solar generates at DC, wind uses asynchronous generators. And In thinking through post 2028 power supply for the region, how do you accurately forecast how the market will value those resource attributes? It makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And thank you for the tough question. That is not an easy thing to speak on. I mean, the forecasts are always trouble just because you're so far out in the future and there's a lot of assumptions in there. But I think you nailed it spot on. What you really need to look at is sort of what type of regulations are being spoken about, are being passed, and what they're going to look like as you move forward in the future. And so, when I think about it, I think about looking at certain things like carbon standards, right? So, for instance, in Washington, they passed CETA, which has targets moving forward. I think getting to carbon neutral in 2040 or something around that time frame.
Right.
You look at RPS programs; those are continuing to grow and to step up in the amount that's needed to pass those obligations or to verify those obligations are met. I think you're going to see more states jumping on with carbon, more states jumping on with RPS. And so you really got to be cognizant of what that's going to cause to prices. And so, when you put that hat on and you look at what you want for your future mix, especially, our industry, a lot of times it's, 10 to 20 year contracts. I don't think you're going to see contract sizes shrink too much because you sort of need that repayment period for the investments to incentivize them. And so, you got to look at what that cost of those resources, it points to things like low carbon or no carbon, hydro, solar, wind, even to a degree, like I was talking about some biomass, those are geothermal. Those are huge resource types that will help you to manage what it looks like are the obligations coming forward. And then it takes me back to do this, you're going to need to have a very diverse set of geographic locations where these can be developed and can be expanded on to match, which is already a diverse set of loads. And so transmission access, fair and open and economical is going to be extremely important. I don't think we can get to this future, of a more diverse, renewable, low carbon fuel mix of generators without really expanding and paying attention to transmission and the reliability of that. Bringing something on like wind is very volatile. What resources are you going to pair with it? How are you going to ensure you can transmit it to load centers as it's, generating? Those questions we have to continue to strive towards and I think get better on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you gave us first pitch was coal is king forever. The second pitch is hydro, wind, solar, and biomass. Third pitch, you got one last pitch for us?
Third pitch, just conservation. We'll just conserve our way completely out of this. At some point, we just won't need to use electricity anymore. We're going to make a huge flip and everything will be so efficient that, we're just going to need a few resources here and there, turn the lights on. Maybe we'll get back to the days where a little gas generator at your house is all you need or something like that. And
That was
the world will be great.
That was, oh, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
That was actually spoken about in a training. I was so surprised. I think it was this year, but it felt still early enough in my career that I was in talking to Paul about it. I was pretty surprised that they put it out front. They talked about in I think it was the advanced public utility accounting course, everyone moving to internal generation and solar panels and how, utilities in the future, and this is just around the corner, effectively becoming more like equipment and service monitors. I think they blew up the conversation about microgrids. That just made me think about that.
No, that's a good segue because, I think that's also kind of important when you talk about grid resiliency or transmission, reliability, things like that. I think as I put my utility hat on, it is really important for utilities to really be exploring any kind of local generation that they can have, things that are in their service territory where it's not dependent upon a transmission system. It's not dependent on resources far away to be able to, keep some lights on or, keep things going in your service territory. I think utilities do need to, as they're working on wholesale and transmission and market structures and all those kind of really important things, are also paying a little bit of attention to what kind of resources they can have in their direct areas. And that really will be, I think, impactful. You're seeing it with small scale batteries, you're seeing it with rooftop solar. Conservation programs truly have been around, and they are, a form of that. I think how that kind of evolves post 28, which we're seeing now, is demand response. I mean, that will be important too, to having a resilient grid and managing, spikes from renewables. And so, it really is just getting a lot of different arrow types that we can have all together. Constructing really balanced and diverse portfolios, I think is really important post 28. And again, and this is maybe my fifth pitch or sixth pitch, wherever I'm at now, but hydro is important. I think Bonneville, especially in the Northwest, is going to be extremely important. And so hopefully they work with customers and we can really work on those reliability and transmission access issues, and just, really work on managing that power supply, making sure that it stays low cost, that it stays and it helps traditional customers, rural communities, and the likes. And so, I think we have a good opportunity to kind of hopefully negotiate and talk with Bonneville on that post-supply contract, and, lock in a lot of things that were working, potentially make adjustments on some of the things that haven't been working, because, it is a huge part of the Northwest power supply, and hopefully will continue to be so.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. It was great to have the discussion. Look forward to talking more about it, and if you're willing to come back on to talk about it some more. I definitely want to have some areas where I want to push on optimization of transmission versus full RTO models, and push a little bit on like microgrids and local. I actually think it's a really good perspective that we should be looking for local resources because of the transmission constraints that I think you've highlighted and are very real for the future. I
totally agree. I'm more than happy to have those discussions and come back on. And, I think that is really important because, we talked about it a little bit too. Sorry to cut you off. Just is the investment in the transmission grid. It sometimes is hard to get that. You see Bonneville runs up on debt limits. They're the huge transmission provider. How are you going to incentivize that investment? How are you going to get the needed capacity built and maintained? Looking at kind of, microgrids or, behind the meter type resources can help that to a small scale, can alleviate some of that, pressure potentially, if we can't find a better way to incentivize, further development.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I need to kind of reset my thinking around transmission, because when I think of transmission investment, I think of a big transmission line from here to there. But in a lot of ways, maybe the incremental, not incremental, but the investment in our existing lines and transformers may also be able to alleviate a lot of those concerns going forward if paired with the right resources in the right locations. Well, thank you again, Alex, for the discussion and the pitches. Up next, you're going to be slumming with the underground. Are you ready for some awkward conversations that are incredibly personal and revealing the true nature of your soul?
This is the good stuff, it kind of helps me find out what my own soul's like.
Good, exactly. And I'm going to be very judgmental of your answers. I hope you're prepared for it. Do you support federal legislation that would allow Oregon and Washington to permanently transition to daylight savings time all the time in order to forever rid ourselves of the scourge of seasonal time change?
I'm just going to guess I know what side that you land on that from the description. And I must say, probably 110%, I support you. I completely agree. I cannot stand daylight savings time and the switching back and forth. In today's world that's so interconnected and so global, having these regionalized time changes doesn't seem to do a whole lot. I mean, it's just more of a frustration. As much as I like to gain an hour, I hate the losing of an hour. I hate to track it. I just hate to have to deal with it.
And do you really gain an hour? Because my kids wake up at the same time. I'm going to wake up at the same time. All that's happening is a disruption to everyone's life. This is incredibly stupid. I cannot stand it. Follow up.
It's like jet lag without the fun of actually going on a trip.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. Yep.
Which maybe is why it felt so much worse this year, because I haven't gone on a trip for a very long time, and yet I still I'm getting this painful transition with my children without the benefits.
It's just 2020 reminding you You don't get any of the good stuff, but we get all the bad stuff. We're going to give you jet lag, even though we don't let you travel.
You're welcome.
Follow up. And in a related topic that may not seem related, do you now or have you ever created or used an Excel workbook that used VLOOKUPs, HLOOKUPs, pivot tables, or have you ever linked Excel workbooks?
I have.
Oh,
I
no.
cannot say I'm an expert.
Oh,
I
no.
cannot say I have done a lot of it,
For shame.
but I have done a tiny bit of it. It has happened. It's true. Yep.
VLOOKUPs, HLOOKUPs are incredible ways of processors. You should be using index, matches, sum ifs, way more efficient, way less cumbersome. Pivot tables are a scourge on your utilization of computer processor powers. And there is nothing worse than the phantom link in an Excel workbook. Like, close it.
Oh.
I don't know what this link is. Do I want to refresh the link? I didn't even know I had a link.
I will agree completely, because like when you inherit a big workbook, or you're like, and I've changed jobs a couple times, and it's one of those behemoths, and you're like,
Yeah.
you know how hard it is to track this and figure out what the heck. I mean, I will start fresh and create my own, because I'm like, I don't know, one change here and all of a sudden, and I have to trace that, and that gets out of my comfort zone really fast. And I actually appreciate your take, because I don't like doing pivot tables and all that stuff much anyway. I mean, when I was in grad school, they hammered the H and V lookups, so you had to learn them and you had to use them. And pivot tables was the rage, but
I like them for one-off tasks. I mean, when I was in audit and I had to try to look for like a specific, I don't know, I was doing some sampling or something like that, and it was just a one-off task, or I just got this huge data dump of information. I could just basically take that and put in a pivot table, so I could, just auto filter out manually everything all the information I specifically wanted. But
Hillary,
okay,
we're not both
I
sides
think that
this
makes
topic.
a difference.
We aren't both sides in this, okay? There's one side that's right, and there's one side that is just disgusting. So we're not both siding this.
I forgot.
No.
I forgot about that.
I might expose my lack of Excel sophistication, but sum ifs, love those. Love those a lot. And to be honest,
Great.
I just like to hit the filter and manually filter out data a lot of times. I mean, I'll play with those and mess with that to get what I kind of need. And I mean, luckily, I'm not an engineer, and I'm not doing too deep data analytics in my current role. And so I don't have to deal with it too much. But yeah, I'm probably pretty easily won over to your side, Paul.
Okay, good. I'm glad that I have.
I'm going to be Sweden, though. I'm not picking a side exactly in this one.
Good cop, bad cop.
In the middle. Yeah,
I like it. We should have you on next week.
I'm always open.
Let's see. Oh, my next. Yeah, of course I'm next. There's just two of us. Okay.
Just two of us.
Yep, just two of us. Just the two of us. I lost my place. I'm so sorry. Okay, are you willing to, okay, this matches right in. Are you willing to return to Public Power Underground as a special guest correspondent to help us understand niche Northwest Public Power topics that we may not have expertise in?
So I definitely would. This has been a good experience. I think this is a really cool thing. I would love to come back on again, just as long as I always get to do Slummin with the Underground, because this is the fun.
Love it.
As long as this part I'm included in, I am more than happy to come back.
Awesome.
Follow up: is it niche or is it niche?
I think it's potato, and I think I've probably said both. I'd probably say niche more often than niche.
Really?
So I might lean towards niche if I had to pick one, but I definitely use both and heard both.
When you say it in your head, you say niche is what I'm hearing.
I do. When I dream, I think it comes back as niche, not niche.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Next question. Dan Patrick show, BS report, or low post?
So here's one of the things I'll open up a little bit more. That now I'm completely working at home. I'm not working remote, or I'm working remote, not having to commute to work. I used to love the Dan Patrick show on my morning commute. That was like one of my favorite shows to listen to. And I don't get to hear it much anymore. I mean, it's been almost COVID since I listened to it. I don't go back and podcast it. And so I do miss it.
It is a
now I just forgot. What's the two segments you want me to choose from?
Dan Patrick Show. This isn't a segment; it's a separate podcast. The BS Report or Low Post. Which of those? Sounds like you're a Dan Patrick Show person.
I am.
And it kind of looks like you've never heard of the BS Report or the Low Post.
I think I've heard of the Low Post, but not the other one. I'm kind of scrambling here, so I don't know if I have
Report, the godfather of all podcasts.
You're embarrassing me on my podcast knowledge. I just have never been a huge podcaster. So when it's on the radio, I never used to go back and listen to them. I'm probably not able to make an educated opinion. I can just throw it out.
Okay, well, you can just take this. The BS Report is no more, but it was the Bill Simmons BS. It was the original. He is the godfather, the podfather of. Really, it's what got me into podcasts.
Never heard that, and I love it
at all. And my favorite of the genre of podcasts is when Zach Lowe from the Low Post and Bill Simmons from the BS Report do their back and forth podcasts. It is without a doubt the peak of podcast content about NBA basketball. Of course, peak content is of course the Public Power Underground.
I probably got to check it out because I do love NBA basketball. Basketball has a special place in my heart, and so you got me intrigued. I got to go check it out.
Take the recommendation for the Low Post, but
okay.
I have a follow up on NBA basketball. So
Let's do it.
If PNGC were a professional basketball franchise, which team would it be? And additionally, what about Clatskanie Beauty?
Well, I like to fancy myself as the LeBron James. So, PNGC might be the Lakers. PNGC just might be the Lakers because of the talent we can bring to the table.
You just went for it.
Let me see here. That's a tough.
So Roger Gray is like the genie bus of.
Yeah, he's a better looking genie bus.
And Greg is your brow. Anthony.
He's the Anthony Davis.
Davis to your
that 1-2 punch. Yeah. Even though he's not there anymore, but Roger might be. He's very zen-like. He might be kind of Phil-esque, like Phil Jackson.
Oh yeah, that's probably really good.
He does a great job on that kind of mentoring role, and just kind of providing that zen, for lack of a better word. And I could go down that path a little bit.
That's really
let's see,
good.
Clatskanie to an NBA team.
We're gonna.
I might be a little cheesy and take the easy way out. I might have to relate you to the Trailblazers. The hometown favorite. You guys are in a great position. You're local. A little bit of a smaller market. It's not like the big Constellation or the big PGE.
We got chip on our shoulder for sure.
Talent, get great coaching, and you provide a great niche role.
Yeah, you really went cheesy on that one. I respect it. If Fawcett were here, he would have really went for it because he and Mark, when Mark watches this, is going to be really proud of you too. So well done.
You got to have some cheesiness in there.
Right.
It's got to be really some positive.
I'm really good at it.
If I come back on another time or a few more times, I may just have to get a little more aggressive and being kind of snappy on the not so positive cheesy side. But for a first time, first impressions, you only get one chance.
That's right. You're doing good. You're doing good.
That's true. I like this conversation though about going forward.
Yeah. The different sides, just we're all people with many hats. Just can't wear them all at once.
That's right.
Very true. Okay, so are you? Oh wait, here we go. Okay, what kind of music do you play? Well, this is supposed to be the simplest and easiest part of it, but I'm all over the place on this one. I'm just leaning into it. What kind of music do you play while you work? Just kidding. This is Slummin with the Underground. Show us your desktop background or the books on your shelf.
I just read all day. I don't even listen to music. I'm so busy working. Who has time for music, right?
Who has time for me? Yeah, exactly. that was the joke. Yeah.
That is an interesting question. It kind of depends on, the mood I'm in or, the topic that I'm, kind of working on. I get into the, maybe in the morning, a little smooth jazz where it's just real kind of calm and quiet and, you can kind of get into something like that. Maybe, later on to pick me up, I'll get more kind of hip hop, get, more of an aggressive beat coming in and get the energy going a little bit. And
Wow.
after the day, I might put on some hardcore rock just so I can kind of rock out and forget about the day a little bit, you know, in there.
Yeah. Wow.
There's a cool station that my wife listens to. I think it's called Yacht Rock, and that's not a bad one. You know, it's kind of a mix between kind of all those three I kind of said. It's a little hip hoppy, a little kind of rock, and you know, it's not too in your face, and it's not bad.
So
Wow.
what kind of a station is this? Is this like a Pandora station, a Spotify station, or a radio station?
I think we have it on Apple Music, but yeah,
Okay.
you know, just kind of hitting those genres and
So
playing
modern-
there.
Spotify
a modern
has it
station.
too, right? Didn't they? I think
think
was it
Spotify does too.
that they put out what is your most recently hit or your most hit music of the year or something. I had a friend who Yacht Music was, I think, her second on Spotify.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've been liking it a lot lately. I mean, it's been pretty good. I don't have Spotify, so I only go through kind of Apple Music at this point, and
Same.
which is a good thing, except for I know so like few artists and things now because it usually just plays it and it's just auto go, and you hear the songs, and without hearing the song again, it's hard to like recognize it or call it out. But yeah, I mean, I'm also still, you know, I'm a big old school hip hop fan and a classic rock fan, and so, you know, those will hit my ears pretty often as well.
That's awesome. Well, that's it for Slummin with the Underground. Thanks for joining us today, Alex. It's really been a pleasure to have you on. Next week on Public Power Underground, we'll be back just before the end of this crazy year on the 30th with special guest star, General Manager Mark Farmer. Send us any news, jobs, or opinions you'd like to share with our 12 subscribers and I believe 60 faithful views of last week's episode. If you found the episode, you know how to find us, Public Power Underground. It's work to watch, so do it on the clock.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Good. I'm going to read a promo and then we'll be done. Ready? And are you aware of Plug Pass? I feel like you don't know what Plug Pass is, and I'm going to just keep reading promos until people ask about it, just to be clear.
I have no idea other than hearing you say it in one of the videos I watched.
Okay. We're gonna. I think in the future I'm gonna make an actual video so we can show Plug Pass, not just me reading really poorly
That would be helpful.
ad copy.
Yeah.
Public Power Underground is brought to you by Plug Pass. Plug Pass is a convenient way to recover the energy needed to commute to work. No, it doesn't include coffee, it doesn't include an alarm clock, and it certainly doesn't guarantee you'll show up on time. But for a low fixed monthly fee, you'll be charging your electric vehicle at work in no time. Ask about it today. And whoever you ask has no idea what you're talking about, just ask us. Plug Pass, it's open source. Plug Pass, it's just an outlet.